2, recording in Zoom. Okay. Welcome to the Almost World podcast. I'm here with my friend Bryce, and he's been a very great supporter of the podcast for how many years I've been doing this. And I'm really thankful for him being my friend and like really supporting me even the worst of times in my life. Bryce has been there. So Bryce, can you tell me to introduce yourself to the audience? Like who are you? What are you all about?
Yeah, my name is Bryce Cornell. I used to go by Bryce Roadie on YouTube. I guess I still kind of do, although I haven't uploaded much content lately. I've been kind of inactive because I've been moving around a lot. But gosh, where do I start? I think for anyone who doesn't know my story, I am a former Christian apologist turned atheist. And I ended up getting involved in the secular humanist atheist community online and Discord and various other places. And I had my own YouTube show for a while where I would interview people who were still believers, people who had come out of belief, people who were in different religions, people who had very strong opinions on that sort of thing. And then we delved into other topics as well. Politics we touched on, and just socioeconomic issues. Um, and the show, I think, had kind of run its course, and I just started getting a little bit too involved in other things, and so I had to kind of take a break from that. I may go back to it at some point, but yeah, it's just kind of like I felt like I had talked about everything, and there was really nothing more to tell. I kept hearing the same old arguments over and over again, rehashing kind of the same old discussions with new people, and there was very little new being brought up. So I kind of got tired of that, bored of it, and yeah, now but just outside of that, I'm mostly into like comic books and you know, uh collecting comic books is kind of a hobby of mine. It's getting to be an expensive hobby, so I'm having to throttle back a bit. But yeah, I'm just if anybody's curious about like what I do for a living, I'm actually retired military, and so I'm kind of like in between jobs, but I don't really have to work, and I'm also married to an active duty U.S. military member. Um, so yeah, I pretty much do like whatever I want. I don't really have to do anything, which is kind of cool, but it leaves me uh bored sometimes and looking for stuff to do. But we
Mm,
can get into that or we can not get into it. I'm curious about you
yeah.
at this point in your life because the last time we talked publicly,
Yeah.
you were interviewing me about my atheism and you were still a Christian
Christian.
believer. Yeah. And so I always enjoyed talking to you then, even though we had, differences in belief, just because of the way that you approached the discussion and you seemed very open-minded and very intellectually honest and curious. And so I didn't want to like, push my beliefs onto you or pull you out of your belief system or whatever. I just thought naturally, organically, if you were a critical thinker and understood rationality and skepticism, that eventually you would probably come out of it and find your way out through reason alone.
Mm.
And I turned out to be right, but I didn't let you know that at the time, but I could just tell
Uh,
the kind of things you were curious about and the kind of questions you would ask me.
well, we
So
can't for certain like absolutely say that we're right, but like subjectively from all the evidence that we've analyzed with the data we gather, the logic, the arguments, it's just for me, I have concluded that there is no model of God that would convince me that that's like true, right? So so I guess when it comes to like why I became atheist, it was a very long process. So very emotional too. But like I
yeah,
if emotion was just there, I would have stayed because actually the becoming an atheist actually led me into some dark places, because
yeah, that happens.
I talked about this before with my previous guest, Jason, and I said that before my foundation of beliefs my worldview was founded and God was the center of it. And God was the foundation. When that
Hmm.
when that disappeared, everything fell through, right? Like
Yeah.
d- morality, meaning, you know,
Yep.
Genesis,
Yeah, what
the
is the
future.
purpose of everything? Your
Yeah,
life is kind of aimless at that point when
yeah,
all of your when everything is geared around this idea, when you find out that's not true or that's
yeah,
not representative of reality, it's like, well, what do I believe now? What matters now? Where do I go from here? You have to
yeah,
actually think for
exactly.
yourself.
You can't really choose to be atheist because who would want to be atheist? Who would want to live in a dark world where with no objective morality, no guardian, no God, nothing. Like we're not even like technically alive. There's no like fundamental difference between a living thing and non-living thing. We're just
So I
atoms and
would
chemicals.
say I would say that's an interesting question because I have a different perspective on that. The way that you framed it was like who would want to be in this world where, there's no God or there's no objective morality. But I think that the reason people want to be in that type of world is
Mm-hmm.
because they started off believing that that's the way that the world was.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found out it wasn't. And then it's at that point when you ask, well, this sucks because this doesn't match my
Mm-hmm.
expectations and this is against everything I grew up believing and I don't know what to make of this world. But consider someone from Japan, for example,
True.
who
True.
never had a belief in this God in the first place or this type of religion,
Mm-hmm.
they're still able to find meaning without the objective morality or the Christian God or really any other kind of supernatural beliefs
Mm-hmm.
necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't raised with that expectation in the first place. So
Mm-hmm.
to them, the world is the world. This is the world we live in and we have to find a way to interact meaningfully with each other. So we should probably develop a system of morality and not hope that there's something out there like giving us morality, which we can't test. And
Yeah.
the evidence seems to be against that. So,
Mm.
so it's a matter of perspective, right? I think but for you and
Definitely.
I, we both grew up in a Christian mindset and having
Mm.
certain expectations. And then when that fell away, when we realize that's not necessarily the way it is, you're
Mm.
left wondering,
Mm.
what is this? How do I make sense of this? But
Mm.
someone who started off without that is not in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually a dilemma that I'm facing right now. It's either that I've come to terms with my atheism and become and do it and proclaim it publicly, and really live an atheist life, not going to church, telling my friends that I don't believe this or not participating in these religious ceremonies, and like telling the next girl that I don't believe in God, and like she'll just be turned off because like, oh, an atheist, like, ooh, weirdo. Or I could still like be a cultural Christian and go to church and be part of the community, be part of this religious Christian nationalist nation of the Philippines. Like that would make my life so much easier, but I choose
Mhm.
not to because I only have one life, and I guess like for me, my one value I've developed is that to be unapologetic, to be based. I just love expressing who I am and what I really believe in, no matter the judgment or
Yeah.
whatever people think about me. It's just I'm living through it. That I
Well,
think.
what you just described
Mm,
is you just expressed an aversion to the idea of living a lie, you know?
yeah.
And what you described, what reminds me of the reality that a lot of gay people and trans
Mm,
people in the LGBTQ community
mm,
experience when they are faced with the prospect of coming out,
mm,
Yeah, you could pretend to be straight and get married to a girl and
yeah.
all this other stuff to meet society's expectations, but you'd be living a lie. Like you'd never
Mm,
be happy with yourself if you were gay and you did that.
mm,
With you could pretend to be a Christian and think that go to church and all that stuff, but
mm,
really you're just going through the motions so that you're not alienated from your
yeah.
family or your community or
Yeah.
whatever. But are you being real? Like would that be sufficient for you to be happy in life?
That's
Probably
true.
not. you know?
Yeah, but if you're in a Muslim country and if you're
Well, you
gonna
don't
get
have that
stoned to death,
option.
you don't have that option. So
Yeah, you
I
don't have
stay
that option. So,
keep it hidden, stay in the closet for now, or move to another
right.
country. It's
Yeah.
reality. Yeah.
And even really, you said in a Muslim country, but in a lot of areas of this country, I'm in the United States
Mm-hmm.
right now. If you're in the Bible Belt and you
Mm-hmm.
grow up in a fundamentalist Christian, you know,
Mm-hmm.
environment, state, neighborhood, community, you could be ostracized for, there's people who could get fired for not being Christian enough, like I
Mm-hmm.
know a few of them. So yeah, it's not just a Muslim thing, although it is definitely worse in
Mm-hmm.
most of the Muslim countries.
Yeah. Well, now that we're talking about like right and wrong and living a lie or not living a lie, what do you think
Mhm.
about like morality? Do you have a developed morality that you think is objective? Like there is like evil or good out there in the world, or is it just social constructs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So my answer is complicated. I'll try not to make it convoluted, but
Yeah.
it's complex is a better way to say it. Do I believe in objective morality? No, because the way that I define morality is pretty much the standard dictionary definition. It's principles concerned with the distinction of right and wrong or good and bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
So by definition, morality is a judgment. It is discerning between what is right and what is wrong. And if it's a judgment between what's right and what's wrong, that means it's mind dependent. And anything that's mind dependent is necessarily subjective. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing intrinsic in the world that is good or evil. Those are not qualities or properties of the universe. They are judgments that
Yeah.
minds make. So we have to assign a good value or bad value to a behavior. If there's no minds to assign a value to a behavior, then good and bad, right and wrong, those are meaningless terms.
Well,
Right for
actually,
what? Good for
there
whom?
is atheism is a spectrum, right? But there are a lot of secularists
Mhm.
who don't believe in God or religion, but believe that there's like this objective morality,
Yes,
which
I'm aware of a couple of them.
and I'm like, yeah, but like you're just making a new religion, Like what's the difference between that and like Zen, being a Buddhist? It's no different.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair,
Mm.
atheists don't have a creed or doctrine
Yeah,
of
they don't.
of atheism,
It's not.
and atheism doesn't address morality. So anyone who is an atheist who thinks that they have a moral system, they have to derive their moral values from something other than atheism because there's nothing there to provide that, right?
Yeah.
So secular morality takes a lot of different forms. There's a lot of different theories of normative ethics.
Mm.
And some people believe that the good of the many outweighs the good of the few.
Mm.
So they have a utilitarian model. Some people believe
Yeah.
in, there's a lot of different models. Some people believe in social contract, I think is one of them that you mentioned.
Mm.
My moral system takes a little bit from everything. Well, not everything, not Christianity, obviously, it doesn't take from, but it takes from a lot of different, basically, I studied a lot of different theories of morality,
Mm.
and I look at the ones which seem to work, which
Mm.
seem to be able to uh, provide some use depending on the context. And, I take a little here. So there's some of it is based on consequentialism, utilitarianism, some of it
Mm.
is social contract, some of it even Kantian ethics. But I think morality is situational. I don't believe that there's a book of morality. I don't think
Mm.
there's a list of rules or a list of moral proclamations. It's
You
morality is not black and
you
white like
choose
that.
your own morality is what I think.
Well, my morality is based on well-being. And,
Well-being.
I'm stealing from other people, but
Mm.
to me, that's the goal because
Yeah.
I want
But you
well-being for
chose
myself.
well-being. Like it's not
Yes,
like
which is a
it has
subjective.
to be well-being. No, that's not
No,
it.
right. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So for me, well-being is important to me. I want to live a longer life, a
Mm.
prosperous life. I want to be happy. I don't want to be sick or ill or in pain or suffering. I would rather be, loved and pleasure and
Mm,
happiness and all of that. And I think that that's what most other people want too. So I have to live in a community with other people where my actions have consequences
mm,
on them and their actions have consequences on me. We better work up a system where we can all be happy and prosperous and live longer and
mm.
healthy and all of that. So to me, that's what
Yeah.
morality is about.
Well, for me, actually, I've been diving into Max Turner and anarcho-egoism. So it's more of like a society where every individual, it's not even like a society, it's just an amalgamation of individuals who are ultimately self-interested or purely egoistic. And so every social interaction is simply derived from mutual benefit. So voluntary, consensual, mutual benefit or mutual aid. So that I mean, like that's an ideal, That doesn't even have to be that kind of society. It's just how I live my life for now is just
Mhm.
about me, and whatever interaction I have with others, it's also for my self interest. But I guess I developed my own morality system for that in a way where my behavior is checked by individuals because if I like do something wrong to them or if I do wrong unto others, then it'll backfire to me and will be and bad behavior is against my self-interest. So that
Right.
kind of like correct
Yeah.
myself, it's a check and
So
balance.
there's a reason why the golden rule is a
Mm,
religious principle in many different religions, even religions that contradict each other. Pretty much every religion has this idea, every major religion has this idea of the golden rule or doing unto others or
yeah,
karma or whatever they want to call it. What goes around
yeah,
comes around.
yeah.
And the reason they have this is because it's through
Protect.
observational experience,
Yeah.
people understand that social beings, humans, when we
Mm,
live in a collectivist society, if you do wrong things to people, they're not going to trust you. They're going to be
yeah,
skeptical. They might even kill you. So
exactly.
maybe it's better to treat them right to protect yourself, just purely through self-interest,
Yeah.
self-preservation, self-protection, self-happiness.
Mm,
If you treat others well, they're more likely to treat you well. If you treat
mm.
them like shit, I don't know if I can curse on here or
Yeah,
not, but
you can. Fuck,
if
shit,
you treat
whatever.
yeah, if you treat other people like shit, they're going to treat you like shit and you're going to feel bad and it's going to
True.
suck for you.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I don't want to say common sense because that's not really a thing,
Mm.
but it's intuitive as a social being.
But
And
here's the
also I
thing,
have to,
right?
yeah,
Mhm.
go ahead.
What about like for example, like if you compare China, let's say, to the USA, where
Hmm.
collectivism, if China were individualistic, it would not be as productive and like as powerful as an economic country as it is, as it could have been, as it could be, or as it is right now, right?
Hmm.
So in a way,
Well,
like
I don't know that for sure, but I'm
yeah,
accepting that for the
let's say
purposes.
that collectivism worked for China, communism, socialism, it worked for China,
Right.
right? And so like even if it doesn't have the ultimate well-being of the individual,
Hmm.
you could still argue that collectivism is necessary for the Chinese people, because in the end it resulted in this economic powerful country, right?
Well, you could argue that,
Yeah.
but my counter argument to that would be what is the benefit to Chinese people of China being a huge economic
Mm,
power if they don't personally benefit from it? Like if they're left behind, if they are killed or starved because they have COVID, or if, their
mm,
human rights are being violated, like, is that beneficial? When you say this is better for China, I would ask, is it better for China? What
mm.
does better for China mean? But it's certainly not better for most Chinese people, right?
True,
So
true.
to me, what's better for China is what would end up yielding the best result for most Chinese people. I
So,
think if given the choice between living in that type of society or
well,
living in
yeah.
America
Well, if you're
or
looking at it from
Europe.
a utilitarian perspective, truth doesn't really matter, or what the right thing doesn't matter, as long as like the maximum number, potential like people who are made like satisfied. I guess that's the real goal for utilitarians, right? If we
Right.
look at
If
it.
you're purely
Yeah,
utilitarian,
yeah,
I'm not purely
yeah,
utilitarian. I incorporate utilitarian principles.
yeah.
Generally speaking, I think the goal should be to help the most amount of people, but not at the expense of the suffering of a minority, for example, right? That would not be justified because you're causing suffering
Mm,
to people who are part of your community. So if the goal is if the goal is well-being for the community, you don't accomplish that by harming a subset of your community. You're
what do you
actually
think
doing
about
against.
empathy?
Well, it was funny because I was actually going to bring that
Yeah,
up
yeah, yeah,
before you started. So I think that empathy is an evolved trait in social species.
yeah, yeah.
So most humans have empathy. Most dogs have empathy.
Mm,
Chimpanzees, crows, really any species that lives in a like collective type society, they have a sense of empathy because they have to live together and they have to have moral rules and to govern their society. So it's different from species to species. But I think that as a social species, human beings, we naturally are empathetic. We see other people who are like us, like we can recognize when someone else is suffering. Most people feel some kind of way when they witness an innocent person suffering, and that's a natural response. And that's necessary if we
mm,
are to have personal relationships with each other. So I think that that is foundational to any moral system.
mm.
And anything that's claimed to be a moral system that doesn't incorporate empathy isn't really a system at all. It's
Well,
probably
yeah.
just an appeal to
Are you
authority.
familiar with anti-humanism?
No, I've heard the term, but I don't know what it means.
So
So why don't you
basically
break that down?
it's the exactly the opposite of humanism, where
I mean,
humanism
it
is
sounds like it.
yeah, yeah. So humanism is where it centers on humanity our core values, be what is it means to be
Mhm.
human, right? Love, dreams, satisfaction,
Freedom,
morality.
yeah.
Yeah, being human, right?
Mhm.
But so anti-humanism sort of says that, from Foucault, he basically like it treats humanity as just no different from any other species. So there's no speciesism, there's no
Mhm.
discrimination of life form or non from living and non-living things. So basically, it's saying like, hey, humanity, is not the end all be all of what matters in the universe. You're just one little speck, right?
So, from an existentialist perspective, I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
From a morality perspective, I don't take that into consideration at all.
Well, from your
Because,
morality, because your morality is based on well-being, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. So, I prioritize humanity and human well being because I'm human and I'm biased.
This or discriminatorily.
Yeah, yeah. I want to survive and I'm human, which means I want other humans to survive because I depend on them for my survival. And
Mm,
if that means the destruction of the broccoli that I just ate,
mm.
because broccoli is alive, right?
Well, I mean, like, yeah.
So
So,
be
so
it.
your morality is your choice, but anti-humanism is just the truth, right? That
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's why I differentiate between
Mm,
existential claims and
mm,
moralistic claim, because I don't think that that has anything to do with morality. It may
mm.
be the case that life in general has no
That
meaning. All
doesn't
life is
matter.
equal to non-life. It doesn't matter intrinsically. That's fine.
Mm.
But it matters to me.
Yeah.
And it matters to most other people who are alive because we're biased.
But here's the
So
thing,
that's
right?
all we need.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
my point is like, so let's say, yeah, the universe is anti-humanistic, humanity isn't the
Mhm.
center of it, so including empathy, which is a core humanistic trait, right? So let's say,
Well, it's yeah. Yeah.
so
Well, I was going to say it's a
yeah,
humanistic trait, but it's also a trait in other social
yeah,
species as
yeah,
well.
it
But
is one of yeah, it is a humanistic trait, but if you think about it, right, like empathy is only necessary if it benefits the well-being of each individual in a society, right, in a human society. But what if the human society does not need empathy to have well-being? I'm gonna say that empathy in that scenario would be obsolete, right? You
it
you can have
would. Yeah, theoretically that would be
Theoretically.
true, but the problem with that is the fact that so this is now an existential claim.
Yeah.
Humans are an empathetic species because humans are social beings. If humans were more like tortoises or
Mm.
turtles, then we wouldn't need empathy because we would be individualistic and solitary. We wouldn't live in
But we
societies. We
already
would just
are,
be
right? So many people can live by themselves in their rooms or in caves as hermits, right? They survive alone. They
right.
could.
But those are outliers. That's not the average person. These are people, you're talking about people who live off the grid or don't want
Mm,
any human contact. Usually they're older, not older, but I mean, people who have, been scorned by society or harmed in some way and or feel threatened or whatever the case may
mm.
be. Yes, there are people like that, but those are outliers. That's not a normal thing for most people. The natural instinct for the majority of people is to be around other people and that giving them fulfillment.
Well,
So
what
we have
here?
to so I judge outliers differently than like I don't make general statements about humanity by describing the small minority of people who are different.
Okay,
We
okay,
have to
yeah,
acknowledge that they exist and yeah, they have different priorities, but I don't want to live like I actually want to live in, most people in this country live in cities and there's a
yeah.
reason for that. There's people who live in more rural areas, the countryside, or maybe in the suburbs if they don't want, but there's a reason why cities are so populated and so crowded and why the majority of people who live in a country live in cities
Mm,
because it's beneficial for them to be
mm.
interacting with each other. It's easier.
So empathy is what I'm trying to argue is that if let's say there could be a situation where society does not need empathy for the maximal well-being of each individual, like I could just throw it away, and we could be unempathetic individuals, you know,
I
living the
mean,
best of our lives.
yeah, but I think the problem with that comes
Mm.
in. I don't think that that's a type of society that would survive very long. I
Why do
don't
you
think it
think
would,
so?
because without the quality of empathy, if somebody needs help on the street and nobody ever helps them, then that person could die. But at the very least, if they survive, they're going to be the type of person that doesn't help anybody else. Because, like, if it's just normal to never help anybody, you're going to end up losing a lot of
But
people
isn't that
through attrition, right?
survival of the fittest, right?
It
Where
is, but the problem is survival of the fittest works when you're. Oh, do we need to wrap it up, or did
no,
you want to
it's
start another
okay.
one? Okay.
We can finish it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think survival of the fittest is something that exists in nature and is just descriptive of beings that have the best chances of survival in their environment. But it doesn't drive what is in our best interest to do. Like it's not a model of behavior for us
Mm.
because what's in our best interest as humans isn't to ignore or hurt other humans. It actually works against us because those humans are now a threat to us, right? So how long can you live in a society with people who are skeptical of you, who don't like you, who don't care about you, and would see it in their best interest to steal from you, rape
Every
you, murder
libertarian
you.
ever would want that.
But how long would you survive in a society like that?
Yeah.
Eventually the society is going to crumble and it's going to dwindle in numbers until, yeah, only the strongest survive. And then, but how many is that?
Mm,
How many is they're all basically against each other? That's not really going to be a prosperous society. It's not going to grow. You're not going to have exchange.
mm.
It's going to fall apart basically. So if, like I said, so for the individuals who want to live off the grid and away from society, yeah, they don't need empathy because they're alone. There's not other people. Like if they encounter a person once every blue moon, it doesn't matter. But like their lives aren't dependent on them. So they could
You're
do
right. You're
that.
right. You're right.
But if you're going to be part of society and you're going to be interacting, going to school, having a job, making money, wanting to be promoted, if you're going to have all these things, you have to have some sort of empathy,
So
because
here's the
if you
thing,
don't,
right?
people
Like,
aren't going to like you.
what attitude should one have towards empathy? Because let's say I'm someone who only cares about my own self-interest. I could use empathy as a tool to make people to be a part of society, to be integrated. Because as an empathetic individual, it'd be a lot easier for me, and society would also benefit for me, in a way, right? If I'm
Yeah.
I'm empathetic, and I use empathy for my self-interest. But what should that sort of attitude should I have? Should I be have like genuine like empathy, or could it just be on the surface? What do you think?
Well, empathy to me is the quality of actually feeling something for other people. So, what
Interesting.
you're basically asking, I think, is if you just fake it, if you just act altruistic to other people because it's in your own self interest, is that bad? And I would say no, because at the end of the day, what matters is your actions, not your
Mm.
feelings, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. You've heard that before, right? So what matters is how you actually treat people, whether you feel empathetic or not. If you treat people nice, you're better off because they're probably going to be nice back to you. But I would say that if you don't have the sensation of empathy, if you don't feel pain when you see someone else is in pain, if you don't feel sad or some kind of way about that, that's abnormal. That would be indicative of an abnormal
Yeah.
psychology, and that's diagnosable, because
I don't
that's not
believe
how we're
in I don't
genetically
believe in
programmed.
diagnoses. I think it's just mutations in evolution. It's just variations in genetics.
Okay, well, that sounds like that may have to be our next conversation, because I'm a psychology major, right?
Oh,
I
okay.
have a degree in psychology, and so and my mom is a therapist. She's a mental health provider, so
Okay.
I have a different perspective about that. But yeah, that sounds like something we could. And by the way, that's cultural too. There's
Yeah, cultural.
Eastern philosophy and Western medicine. That there's conflicting views there about what is the cause of
Hmm.
these behaviors and whatnot. So that sounds like an interesting discussion as well.
So tell me, Bryce, like
Mhm.
in the last 5 minutes, like tell me, how do you think what do you think is a life worth living? Can you describe it?
For me, life worth living, and this is purely subjective based
Mm.
on what I
Yeah.
want. I want to live as long as possible, absent of suffering. I want to learn as much as I can, and I want to use that knowledge to benefit the human race so that other people can experience that. I want to leave the world a better place than I found it in, and that requires me learning more about the world, learning how to interact with people. To me, the purpose of life is to enjoy it. Life is
Mm.
fulfilling when you enjoy it, having different experiences, going new places, meeting new people, having fun, developing personal, loving connections with other people. That's what fulfills me. So that's what makes me happy. And so to me, the goal of life is to be happy for as long as possible.
For me,
That's the
it's like
primary goal. And then the other goal is actually to help other people achieve that as well. So
for me, I just treat life like an amusement park. You just maximize the fun and experience. That's it. Nothing else matters. I mean, it might change, of course. I'm in this phase of my life, like
yeah, we
just
are
get
at different
atheism.
ages.
I
How old are you?
24.
Yeah, you're 24. So I'm like almost twice your age, right? And so I probably had that stage of life
Yeah.
too, because you're in the prime of your life physically,
Mm,
and you wanted to, I don't know if you're at the prime of your life economically, that's a
yeah.
different
Yeah.
situation, but physically, you have less fear,
Mm,
you have your whole life ahead of you, and so everything seems like a thrill. So yeah, that's a
yeah.
perspective. I'm at an age now where I'm middle aged, and I've seen a lot of things, done a lot of things. I've
Mm,
seen the benefits of
mm,
that. I've seen the detriments of it.
mm.
And now I'm trying to maximize my life as possible, because I
Which
have a little
parts
bit
of your
less of
life
it.
are you trying to maximize?
But well, just basically everything I said, the
Everything.
the happiness, the reduction of suffering for
I see,
me,
I see.
and by extension of others,
Interesting.
and that's what makes me happy now. But
Right.
I couldn't have, gotten to this point if I was still religious, if I was still, a faithful Christian.
Well, a
That
lot of
would not
religious
be my
people do
priority.
good for the world too, you know. Like,
Oh yeah, I'm not
yeah.
saying that they don't. They absolutely do. But my motivation for being a good Christian would be to make it to the next life,
Hmm.
right? Because this life doesn't matter if you're
True.
this is just the rehearsal.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
real life is coming next in heaven, and that's what you
Exactly.
have to look forward to. So you can deal with the bullshit here and not take it seriously as long as you worship God and
Yeah.
obey and do all that.
We got two
Well,
minutes.
that's yeah. So and I'll just close by saying now that I no longer believe any of that nonsense, I recognize that this is probably the only life that I have. This is the only life I know I'm going to get. So I need to
YOLO.
maximize this
YOLO.
life. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You only live once. And so I want to make it a good life. And so that's how I treat it now.
Hmm. Well, Bryce, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm definitely gonna invite you next, and I hope
I
that you
appreciate it.
go back to content creation, man. Like, what are you doing? You have, you know, you're at home. You gotta do the
I
content
like being a
creation.
guest. I like it when people invite me onto their podcasts and their shows and their YouTube channels because there's
Yeah,
less pressure and less stress on me
true.
to have to be to meet everybody's expectations being a
Yeah.
host and all that. So it's easier.
I don't care, but I definitely look at the numbers and the stats too, you know, like I want to go
Yeah.
viral. Anyway, thanks, Bryce, and to anyone who's still listening, thank you so much for listening to the Almost World podcast. We are out. And